Now, I've done a lot of work on taking pensions early and looking at the effects and getting rid of the myth that you lose 20%. But today what I want to look at is what happens if you take your pension at the normal pension age. And it's the topic of abatement. Now understand this, you have to remember that all the money you have paid to the government every month has not been going into a piggy bank. No, that money is not a pot of money that you can get your hands on when you retire. The money you've paid out every month to the tune of thousands every year has not been put into a piggy bank for you to use. No, instead you have paid the government and in return they owe you. What they owe you is a promise to provide you with a pension in your retirement. Now this promise is based on an Act of Parliament that was first introduced in 1834. And to give you an idea of just how long ago that was, it's when Charles Grey was the Prime Minister. He was the Earl Grey. You may know a T by that name. Or consider this, it was only the year before in 1833 that slavery in the UK was abolished. Now I mention this to give you an understanding of where this promise came from, the social circumstances that were around about looking after employees when they came to retire. And it comes from a time before pension funds as we know them had become commonplace. It's where lords had manors, they had estates, they had tenant workers, and there was no state pension. But enough of the history lesson. All that you need to know from this is that the state has promised to look after you in your retirement. But what exactly does being looked after mean? The historical view is that you would be looked after by being paid to do a job. They pay you and therefore they're looking after you by giving you employment, or by having a pension once you could no longer work. And this led to the concept that teachers would not need to receive more than they were receiving when they were working. So there is a limit on the scheme in how much you can receive as a pension if you go back to work. Because if you're working, the state is looking after you because they're paying you to work. The limit is the tricky bit, but it's somewhere close to the highest salary that you've had in the 10 years before your retirement. It's adjusted for inflation each year. Now it's slightly more complicated, but just bear in mind it's round about the highest figure. I'll go into it in a bit more detail on the next slides. This limit is called the salary of reference, and it is the highest salary that is used in your calculation of your final salary. Now there are two methods used to calculate the final salary. There is this method A, which is simply the final 12 months of your salary. So very simply, it is the final salary you had. There's no messing around. It is just how much you earned over the last year. So if this was the final salary, the salary of reference would be the same, 47,588. But there is a second method, method B, and this is worked out using revalued salaries from the last 10 years. Now that is higher. So it will be the salary that is used as the final salary, that 52,076. But this is where it gets a little trickier. The salary of reference this time isn't that figure. It is the highest actual salary that was used in getting that figure. So to find out that, we need to look at the 3 years that were used in the method, 2007 to 2010. The benefit statement has these labelled as method B. And it is the highest salary in this set, which is 52,661. So the salary of reference, therefore, is 52,661. In the future, if this teacher was to earn that amount from teaching, then they would not get any pension. Their pension would be abated. So let's give you some examples to put that into a real context. So taking this example of a teacher whose pension taken at 60, and they're in the normal pension age 60 scheme, if their pension was 20,000 and who has a salary of reference of 52,000. So there's our salary reference. That's the ceiling of which their income and their pension cannot go above that line. So let's take scenario 1. They take a teaching job that pays 30,000. So on top of this, they get to keep all of their pension because that takes them to just under the salary of reference. They get £50,000. However, in scenario 2, if they take a teaching job that pays 40,000, on top of this, their pension would take them over the limit, and so £8,000 of that pension is stopped or abated. So despite having a job that pays £10,000 more, they will only end up receiving just £2,000 more than scenario 1. The salary from the teaching plus their pension cannot go above that 52,000. And scenario 3, they take a teaching job that pays 60,000. This is over the salary of reference, so all of the pension is abated. They don't get their pension, they don't get their salary cut. They still get their 60,000. Now, this all applies only to income from teaching. If we take scenario 4 here, they take a retail job that pays 60,000. That's over the salary of reference, but it is not a teaching job. It is not one in which they can pay into the teacher's pension scheme. And so they do also get their pension of 20,000, and they will receive that total of £80,000. Abatement only applies to teaching jobs that are eligible to pay into the teacher's pension scheme. Now, one final point. Abatement only applies if you take your pension at or after your normal pension age. So if this teacher had taken their pension at 59 years and 11 months, the limit is removed. Their pension would be slightly less, £40 a year less, so they get 19,960. But they could earn any amount from teaching, and abatement does not apply. So in scenario 5 here, if they took that £40,000 job, they would get the full 19,960 pension without abatement, and they would receive just under 60,000. Taking it early removes the limit on the pension. So to summarise, abatement only applies to the final salary pension schemes. If you're in the career average, it has no effect, unless you've also got a final salary pension, in which case they will cut that one if you go over the limit. It only applies if you retire at or after your normal pension age. So if you go early, no problem. The limit is called the salary of reference, and although it can be a little bit different from this, generally it's the highest salary that is used in your pension calculation. And it only affects teaching positions. If you take on a job that could pay into the teacher's pension scheme, you could find that your pension is abated or cut to that limit. There are things you can do to avoid it. If you work outside of education, then there's no problem. Your pension is only abated if you take on a job that could involve you paying into the teacher's pension scheme. And of course, if you take your pension early, before your normal pension age, there is no abatement. Even if you take it 1 month early. 1 month early means you get 99.8% of your normal pension. And if you've seen my sheets and videos on taking the pension early, you'll find that actually taking it a month early means that you stay ahead until you get into your 90s.